2 more weeks, and Ohio State is back on the practice field. Spring ball is just around the corner. Welcome to March, and welcome to Roosters, a fun, casual joint. Bradley Robinson in the building. Bill Landis, Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. Brad, I need your expertise, both academic and athletic.
All right.
What do you make of this setup with the schedule? Just, you normally be going to practice tomorrow. 2 acclimation periods.
I always couldn't stand the 2 practices before spring break. Had nothing to do with my spring break activities. It was more just we had 2 practices, and then you take it some time off. And then that practice always coming back from break was always kind of vibes were different, vibes were off. Everyone getting
that's because of the spring break activities.
Yeah, but okay. So the interruption, spring break activities aside or not, I thought it just never made sense. It makes sense to get the acclimation periods out of the way, but a lot of that stuff you do in acclimation anyways, you're doing in part of your winter workouts. It's a lot of field stuff, even with it if it's without footballs or not. So you're getting a lot of that in. So I think it makes more sense. I was always a proponent of switching the winter spring schedule to kind of more what it is now, of just a little bit closer to the NFL off season. I think we talked about it last time I was on. Just the longer season is going to change all up. So I'm pretty happy about where it's going. I know academically speaking, a lot of the guys kind of probably wrote off the first month of the semester anyways because they were busy winning and celebrating a national championship. Rightfully so, as I do teach classes sometimes, so I got to talk to like fellow professors and stuff, and they're like, yeah, they didn't show up for class for like the first 2 weeks. We got like the email notice and stuff, but everything I've heard after the fact is like they all did good, caught up on school. But in terms of what I've talked to the guys, I think the guys have enjoyed it a lot. I think a lot of them will actually go train on spring break. You'll see a lot of guys will go back out to the West Coast or go somewhere warm and do a lot of training. So I think that actually will line up well for the start of spring practice.
Bill, do you think that – let's fix this overall calendar.
Yeah.
Because we've heard Matt Rule talk about, the spring and Ohio State's doing a spring showcase as well, not a real game. It feels like there are more coaches speaking out about getting rid of spring ball in the form that we've always known it and maybe pushing it all out to summer and OTAs and NFL stuff. What would be the ideal setup, do you think? And can some of these changes actually be made?
Yeah, I think so. I was thinking the other day, actually, because after the NFL draft, there's rookie mini camp, right? Like, can college football do a version of that where March or April, obviously you can't just do rookies because you only have like 20 or so players out there, but can you do like first and second year players / transfer kind of mini camp deal where maybe you get those guys on the field for a week or 2, take a break, then you bring the full team back for like an OTA situation? I agree that I think this current model has kind of run its course a little bit, and it probably would be beneficial for a lot of teams to actually do more football in like June. Like, I'm not saying go out there and pop the pads for 3 weeks to prepare yourself for training camp, but in addition to like the Ohio State model of starting and then taking a break and then continue practicing, it was also odd to me that like spring ball ended and there's like almost 3 months before you start playing football again. Mm-hmm. I think you could sprinkle in, but probably like shorten whatever this initial window is down to maybe 2 weeks instead of 15 practices, and then do another 2 or 3 week thing in June. That would just align better with college football is right now. I think more follow that NFL model, and I guess in that you lose spring games, but it doesn't seem like anybody's particularly interested in that anyway. My thing with the spring games is like I would still very much like to keep something for the fans in the off season.
In the NIL era, you can just do an NIL event where you have the entire team.
Yeah, so I don't even know like whatever that is. Does it have to be televised? Like, do people even? How many people are actually sitting down on their couches watching spring games anymore? Anyway, so
did they already bump the price of the spring showcase up to $50? I swear it used to be $5.
There's some sections that are reserved. Yeah. I just think this calendar was built in a time when early enrollees didn't happen, and like all this stuff has changed. 90% of your incoming recruits are on campus by January 5th. So we used to have the summer off because schools didn't even start until late part of September. So guys didn't even arrive on campus till July in a lot of cases back when all this calendar started. So there's no reason that it shouldn't be split up. And again, a 2-week window in the spring where you have the incoming freshmen transfers and it's just those guys. And then you have 3 weekends in June where they have 3-day windows. I just think there's so many different things they could do that makes sense. And again, in the NIL era, you can still use those months to make money and get fan engagement without having to deal with the worry about your roster being poached or whatever. And then you obviously that rolls into only having one transfer window, which happens at the end of the school year. But that happens the last 3 weeks of May or something like that, and then June 1st you know who your guys are.
What else would you change, Brad?
Obviously I would change signing day, but I would go October or August 1st and February 1st and just have 2 periods there. And then I would change the fact that if the NHL can play night games at Ohio Stadium, then so can the damn Buckeyes.
I don't think anyone ever said that the Buckeyes can't play night games.
Sorry, I was just was that game on Fox?
Huh? No, it was on ESPN.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains it.
The home of night games.
Yeah. I mean, the real challenge here for the current administrations are just maintaining your rosters. I think you have to have a hard stop on when guys can enter the portal. I mean, right now, graduates can go whenever they want. There still needs to be rules as far as the roster goes, and I just don't know that anyone's got the appetite to do it.
Every time they try and make a rule, they get struck down by the courts.
Well, yeah, I mean, until Congress actually gets involved and there's some sort of actual legislation to direct how this NIL stuff's supposed to work, everything is just going to be completely thrown up against the wall.
Jeremy Birmingham, commissioner of college football.
I have no interest in, and I don't know the right moves, but I know there's people out there who are involved that do, and I think that they are. The problem is most of these decisions are being made by presidents of schools and people who are not actually involved in football, and
that's the biggest thing. It's the step number 1 is separating it from the academic calendar,
because no one
and stop pretending like it is an educational endeavor, and then you can progress forward.
Brad said the professors have already stopped pretending that on their end. So when you look inside the Woody for those guys right now in the length of season that they went through, Brad, how many of those guys how much time did they need off? How many guys were eager to get back in and start thinking about 2025? What's the balance? I'm sure it's not the same for everybody, but what's the appetite to get back to work for those guys who've already accomplished something?
Definitely comes down to who you are as a guy. Everything I've noticed always in my years at Ohio State is everyone knows the gravity of coming to play football at Ohio State, so you're never going to see any guys take breaks lightly. Every time you see anybody travel, they're posting that they're training on social media, no matter where they go. And I think that's just part of the reality that, hey, you're at Ohio State. If you're not working, your teammate's going to work, and he's going to pass you up. So I think that's something that just always happens. So guys are going to work. It's more of the mental aspect of am I in that Woody Hayes at 6 a.m. every single day? Kind of go back to the scheduling things that Bill talked about. So the normal spring ball schedule back in the day, if you had a practice Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, you're lifting Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you also have meetings. So you're spending basically 6 a.m. to noon in the building before you go to afternoon classes, either lifting or doing meetings. And the part with that is you're breaking up the practice schedule, and usually you practice 3 days in a row in season, and you kind of you build off the entire week. But in spring ball, it's just the separated practices, and that kind of gets to be a little much. It's very draining because you're also lifting 3 times a week, practicing 3 times a week. So the physical stuff there, you're also getting, it's just a kind of a nightmarish toll for a month and a half. Where the NFL model, mini camp, you show up on a Thursday, all Thursday afternoon, and his meetings, install. Then Friday, morning practice, meetings, lunch, meetings, afternoon practice. You do 2 days for 3 days, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Monday morning, you start your training program with the team. So it's you get a ton of on-field knowledge really fast, which would be great for those younger guys because you're from the field to the meeting room to the back to the field. It's 2 days, but it's not a strenuous 2 days like back in the day fall camp. It's just, I think that on-field teaching benefits a lot more in that shorter window for new guys that have to learn versus when you break it up 3 days and you're having training in between it. So I think kind of shifting towards that OTA mini camp model away from the typical college calendar would be a lot more beneficial, just also physically.
Do you think that Mick had to change anything over the last 6 weeks, or what this stretch of winter workouts looked like, given the length of the season, given the change to the spring camp model?
I think he definitely. I know he did based on what I heard, and I'm sure he probably started thinking about it back in November of when you think, hey, if we make a push here, because he usually has that winter schedule prepared pretty regularly and pretty far in advance. So I think he did make a lot of changes. From what I've heard, it had a lot to do with snap count stuff, how much you actually played, and things like that. And then obviously 90% of your new transfers or rosters are in. So those guys, I know for a fact, those guys hit the ground running fast and hard. So which makes sense. They haven't played a lot of football. They have a lot to learn. Simply just, hey, how do you lift at Ohio State? What's the different things? And also practicing and things like that. So I think the shift was definitely made. It's just you won't know the benefit of that shift until midway through the season because it does stack up that long in advance. So,
Bill and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago in the middle of workouts. Just some picks that we had that we were watching who would emerge from this stretch of 6-7 weeks of workouts, go into spring ball, who needed it the most. Maybe we'll update that list, Bill and I. But Berm, you weren't on that show. Who are you targeting to watch that you think needs to really capitalize on this stretch and springboard into camp?
James Peoples is one of them, I think, is a guy that has an opportunity to come in and be the every down back at Ohio State. C.J. Donaldson is there, and I think he's going to push him. And I would hope for James' sake he's not getting any sort of sense of complacency like he's going to be the starter because he was the guy that had been recruited and signed a year ago. C.J. Donaldson has just as much of a stake to that starting running back spot as James does. And the other one is maybe not about like the physical side of the sport or the physical side of being it's Carnell Tate to me. Like I think Carnell has got to where he is in the last 3 years, but he's been sort of the afterthought, and in some ways he still will be because he's lined up next to Jeremiah. But Carnell needs to be a leader and needs to be the vocal guy in that room now, is the veteran in that room. He needs to be someone to step up, and it's not really his way. Carnell is a very reserved kid, very introspective and almost reclusive at times, and I think he needs to step up and not just assume that Brandon Innes is going to be the guy to take on the heartbeat of the offense, because Carnell is being paid a lot of money by Ohio State to be pretty good, and it's more than just how you are between the white lines on Saturdays, and they need that to step up in that room. When you lose a Mecca, it's not, you can't just replace a Mecca with one person.
Yeah, and I think Brandon Innes is going to try.
Yeah,
I mean, and when it comes to the heart and soul and heartbeat and voice, I think it's obvious that Brandon Innes wants to do that, and Jeremiah Smith is going to be the lead by example guy always, and it is how Carnell fits in that is interesting. It's a unique dynamic because he is going to be overshadowed on field still by Jeremiah Smith, and when it comes to stepping up and being on the leadership council, I think it is a safe assumption that Brandon Innes is going to keep doing that because he was already doing it when Emeka was here. So that is a weird dynamic, but also a good one, because I think if you look at Ohio State's wide receivers, they can still piece that together with those top three, each bring something to the table, and then that's why you look then as Mylan Graham or Bryson Rogers, the next one in there.
I feel like Carnell Tate maybe started to break out of a shell a little bit too last year. I don't know if it was after that Northwestern game or not. I can't quite remember, but I remember like early on in the year he would come out and do interviews and just like kind of soft spoken and short with his answers, and maybe I think sometimes young guys are so focused on like not saying the wrong thing that they end up like not saying anything. But then that very much changed later in the year. I think you just saw Carnell get more comfortable. So I think he'll be fine with that. I agree that they need that from him, but it just seemed to me like he grew to a place where he can handle that now. So I think it's going to be him, and like you don't have to be the kind of leader that Brandon Innes is necessarily. Like getting 100 catches and 1,400 receiving yards and a bunch of touchdowns is a pretty good way to lead too. If you go about your business the right way as you're doing it. So Carnell and Jeremiah Smith can do that, but I think both those guys will be plenty comfortable Carnell kind of working with Brandon to be the emotional leaders too.
Whether he wanted to be or not, the offseason has put Carnell in the spotlight. And so I'm interested just to see how he responds to that. And when it comes to the offense, those are the two guys. Because of running back, you need to have someone – you're not going to replace the production of Quinshon and Travion, but I think it's important for Ohio State to have one of those running backs like emerge this spring as the guy. And I don't – it's fine when
you
have –
those freshmen have like some juice in that way?
Bo Jackson is going to get a lot of reps just from a purely physical, like there's not a lot of bodies, right? So Isaiah West is there, but he's not going to be medically cleared to go full go until like August from what I've heard. Turbo Rogers doesn't arrive until end of May. So right now you only have the 3 scholarship backs there. And I think Bo Jackson physically has the ability to do that. Now, I don't know where he's at mentally or whatever with learning the offense, but those guys are all going to, like, there's no presumptive starter, so someone there has to step up.
And James Peoples is drawing J.K. Dobbins comparisons from guys at the Combine. That doesn't come lightly from anybody. And I also think that says more about just physical attributes too, because J.K. was a voice in the locker room. So James, I've had very little interaction around. He's more quiet, but I think you kind of what's on the front lines of you have to be that voice. Trey was a big talker. Like we have always kind of had running backs that were more of a leader on that offense, and I think you need someone to step into that role.
Yeah, I think just from a running back perspective, it's easier to have two alphas splitting reps than two guys that haven't put themselves in that role yet, because we saw with multiple times in the last decade of Ohio State football where there was two guys who were trying to fight to be the leader that both guys ended up suffering for it, and that was not the case this past year because they were both so established. But I think that you do run the tendency of that happening when you have two guys who are jockeying for leadership positions and trying to do too much.
Brad, who are you watching?
Well, I'm going to go back and touch on the wide receiver stuff just a little bit, because I think if you go back 10 years, there's always one very known leader in that. Terry McLaurin was not just a leader in the wide receiver room, but the entire team. Chris Olave, quieter guy, but really good leader. Emeka, Marvin, quieter guy. And you always had guys with energy, but there's always been one standout. And I think that's something that kind of doesn't get acknowledged about why the receiver room is always great. Obviously, it's a ton of talent, but there usually is like one really good dude that's a captain, that's a leader. And I almost think you go by committee this year because Brandon Inniss has that fire. But Carnell, I think he has come out of his shell more, and I think he's going to be kind of forced into that spot. The coaching staff usually does a good job in the winter of like, hey, you're going to get, like that was CJ Stroud when he was getting ready to be the starting quarterback. It's like he was getting pushed into those roles of, hey, you have to be a voice, a leader. So I think you're going to have the energy with Brandon, but then Carnell is going to have that more, the mature approach, the quiet guy, like, hey, this is what we need to do, calculated. So I think that's good. I've been listening to a lot of the combine stuff. I mean, Julian Saint's getting a lot of praise. And in terms of that, I mean, I think I love the jokes on Twitter about his throw against Tennessee. That at least it's like becoming comical now, and people are making sarcastic remarks about it. I think I don't have any expectations for him in terms of on field. I know he's a quieter guy. I just kind of want to see how he handles the position, like as interviews start throughout spring ball. Like, how does he handle and carry himself? Because I think that's going to say a lot. And also, like, I'm not counting anybody else out in that room. But what I do feel confident about this team is there's a lot to replace, but each position group kind of has a leader or someone that's there, except that quarterback room, which is expected when you lose someone like Will Howard.
So. You have to be, if you're a quarterback, like you have to go. The first time we sit down with the quarterbacks in this spring, both Julian Saint and Lincoln Kienholz better sit down and act like they're the starter, right? Like if either
like when you're in the yard, you got to go beat the crap out of the biggest guy.
Yeah, like each of them has to. I mean, I never spent any time in prison, Bill.
Let me tell you what it's like.
That's what I heard. I know you grew up in Philly.
That's prison or Philadelphia or both.
Same thing.
You have to be the demonstrative type A, I'm the guy. And if that's not your personality heading into spring, like, then I think that's a pretty negative sign. So there's no reason to think that neither one of those guys have that vibe about them, but they haven't been put in a position where they have to display it. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then if I can switch over to defense, or maybe we should take a break and then go to defense. I don't know. It's up to you. What do you want to do?
I was ready to talk more about the quarterback situation because I think that's the most fascinating.
I'll wait
dynamic.
till defense for the break.
Yeah, we can do that after the break. Because like, I don't know how they're going to handle that, Brad. It's like you're not. There's a perception from us outside the Woody that's like, well, Julian Saint is going to be the quarterback. We talk a lot about Lincoln Kienholz and the potential and the upside if he gets that full time opportunity, what that could look like. Like, do you split every rep? I think I can already hear Ryan Day saying it right now. Like, we're going to roll them, and it's going to be 1s and 2s and 3s, and like that's probably what will happen. But and we don't watch every single practice, and you've been through that. The management of that position is the toughest part of being a coach, an offensive coordinator, a quarterback's coach, and especially as you said, when you're replacing Will Howard, like all the spotlight is going to be on that, and we're going to ask every day like how it looked and who's ahead and what's going to happen here. And I have a hunch on how it's going to play out in the end, but not necessarily how they get there.
I think it also, you have to factor in, especially in the spring ball. I think spring ball quarterback competitions are dumb. I think just let both guys go out and play.
Controversies.
Yeah.
That's Berm wants a quarterback controversy. He's begging for it despite being Homer.
New offensive coordinator, though. I think that's a big deal because had Chip Kelly come back, it's kind of everything's established. And if that's the case, then I just basically go see like, hey, both you guys have been here for the past year under the Chip Kelly offense. Like, we're just going to let it kind of fly and see who rises to the occasion in spring ball. Don't try to really make it nitpicky. But now you have a new offensive system going in, so you have to approach it in a completely different way. I think that throws a big challenge in. I doubt it changes that much, but there's still new people in charge, so there's going to be some shift. There's going to be some learning pains, some growing pains, and it definitely makes the spring a lot more interesting. But I think at the end of the day, spring ball will not matter for the quarterback competition.
I almost wonder if because we don't really know what spring ball is going to look like. We know they have 15 days to practice. What those 15 days look like, we have no idea. I think in the past, we would have a fairly good idea of what this quarterback competition would look like. But there's almost an opportunity for Ryan Day to structure this to where like it's not a competition. We're not setting out to find a starting quarterback over the course of these next 15 practices. I think goal number one is like to make sure that everyone stays on the roster after spring practice is over, so that you're not remaking your quarterback room on the fly when May rolls around. So I've always thought like, we're in the media, we have to talk about these things and try to drum up some entertainment, but like the idea of like finding your starting quarterback over the course of 15 spring practices has always felt a bit silly to me. I think like the Dwayne Haskins, Joe Burrow thing was sort of a different animal, but otherwise you don't really have to do that. And I don't think Ohio State feels that way. How they present them will be interesting, and I think it will be like, maybe not with Tavian, but like here are Lincoln and Julian together, like at every turn. Like we're not putting one above the other until we absolutely have to. And honestly, that time's not going to come until August.
Yeah, this next 8 weeks should be about education, not competition for those guys.
Yeah, not controversy.
Not controversy. Save that for August.
Yeah. Okay. You know what's not controversial, Bert?
How damn good mac and cheese bites are.
Oh boy,
finest. The finest.
You tried the oil. Was it fresh?
Yeah, it's perfect. It's perfect.
Do you enjoy the triangular shape?
Yeah, I like it. I mean, I'm not a bite the corner off of one. Usually, I'm a pop it all.
Pop it all.
Yeah, I mean it's
a pretty big bite.
Yeah, I mean it's fine. I'm a man.
We're grown men.
40.
I could bite a triangle.
Oh, okay.
You can't be afraid of the triangle, is what I'm saying. Now it is different if they're right out the fryer and they're super hot. You risk a multiple burn spots.
Yeah,
which is a
You
challenge.
just got to push through that though.
Yeah, you can't be afraid. If it was like a rectangle,
find the edge.
if it was like a rectangle, you'd have
excellence.
one nice defined burn, and this you can have opposite sides of the mouth, which is good. You need to refresh that skin every once in a while, anyway.
That's true. And you can get a head start on that on Tuesday at your local Roosters. $3 mac and cheese bites appetizer Tuesday this week. We're going to take a quick break. We're going to be right back in here because Berm wants to talk about the defense, and we'll do that at Roosters. It's a fun, casual joint.
Roosters has been so fortunate. We just want to be able to give some of that back to the community.
They donate to organizations that are near and dear to their heart, and we're so fortunate to have been with Roosters now for a long time.
They always go above and beyond to help support our foundation to further help veterans.
It's just a wonderful feeling to know that Roosters supports the Buckeye Cruise for Cancer.
All the folks at Roosters are just genuinely kind folks, and they want to make a difference.
Thank you, Roosters Foundation.
Thank you, Roosters.
Thank you, Roosters.
Thank you, Roosters Foundation.
All right, we're back. Yes, it's a shorter show this week. Everyone is on the Buckeye Cruise for Cancer except Brad. He wanted to hang out with us.
Because he has a job.
He's got a real job, and he's got to do things of importance around here. We're just here to talk about Ohio State. You said you want to shift over to the other side of the football and guys to watch.
Yeah, Monday morning's podcast daily, we talked about the defensive line, and in doing so, I was talking about Caden Curry and how I'm not sure he has an established role as an every down defensive end for Ohio State, but he does have a role where he has to be the emotional leader of the defensive line. And I think that is going to be just as important, if not more important for him throughout this spring than what he's able to prove as far as his every down ability. Like now, I think there's other guys in there, Edric Houston, who has a huge personality, and he's when you're talking about the recruiting pedigree, he's the highest ranked guy in the room. So people will automatically look at that and give him a little bit of a deference. But Caden's role as the heartbeat of that group, I think, is more important. Somebody has to replace Jack Sawyer from a leadership standpoint, and that is going to be harder to me than replacing him from a productivity standpoint. So to me, it's Caden Curry.
Yeah, I like that. We were I can't remember who we talked about when we did this before. But
well, that's all right. Just clean slate for him.
Depth defensive tackle is like going to be the thing that I think is on my mind maybe the most throughout Ohio State's entire offseason, I guess aside from quarterback. But a name I don't think we've said, as we've had multiple discussions about that, is Eric Mensah. And maybe it's because his recruitment was so weird. It was just like one day it's like, oh, this kid's committing to Ohio State. It's like, where's he from? What's his deal? It was one of like a Larry Johnson special where like no one knew who this kid was or that they were even recruiting him. I mean, that's kind of been his existence on the roster too. He's just been down there. But like you go to spring practice or any practice, you just walk around the Woody, like he like stands out a little bit. He's like 290-ish pounds, I think, like 6'3", 6'4". Like he's a pretty big kid, and I just wonder if he's been able to fly under the radar, and now he's going to go through this winter program, and he's like fresh because he didn't play a whole lot. What that might look like on the other side of it, like I think he's got some clear athletic upside, and he's a bit of a wild card in that defensive tackle situation, and like I guess Will Smith is too. Obviously, the freshman could be, but like we know what Edric Houston at least we know what the vision for Edric Houston is. We know what the vision for Caden McDonald is, and I think maybe even to a certain extent Jason Moore. But then after that, it's like I don't know. Could be anybody. It could be nobody, and then it becomes a bit of a problem. But Eric Mensah to me is someone who's pretty interesting in that conversation if he can make some jumps during winter conditioning and strength training.
Well, that includes Tywone Malone, who Berm joked about it on Monday morning. It's like, well, you got to have one Ty left in the room, but I think we thought there would be a larger jump for him once you got rid of the baseball stuff and you had a couple years at Ohio State. Like, it was going to happen, and maybe just Tyleek and Ty Hamilton were so good that it didn't have to materialize the way that, and it was behind the scenes happening in a way that we just didn't see on Saturdays. But that's another part of this. Once you get past those top two who we project and expect they're at the top, it's like, boy, it's going to be really fascinating to watch what that plays out like over those 15 practices.
I think the D-line is going to be interesting because you're losing those top two D tackles. Little Moneyball reference here. I don't think you got to replace them. You just got to rebuild them in the aggregate.
That's right.
So I think obviously the big concern there is the run stopping ability that Ty and Tyleek had. I think they'll figure that out. Those other D tackles will pop in. For me, I want to go back to the 2017, 2018 like Rushman packages days on those third down. Move CJ Hicks down there permanently. Just get him fully involved if he's not. I don't know the latest on that, but I think
we think that's what's
he's too talented to not have him have a role. And I think you take this winner and put 10 pounds on him, and I don't think that's going to slow him down enough. I think he's still going to be a factor there. But what's nice is you have a lot of experience coming back at linebacker. Lean on that. I think Arvell Reese is going to take another huge step once again. Obviously, Sonny's back. I think I'm not worried about linebacker at all. But that D line just you need to get creative with it this year more than before, simply because of experience.
I think it's weird and unfortunate because of the era of college football we're in. You can't extrapolate certain things like we used to be able to. Hero Kanu transferring in the old days, 3 years ago, we'd be like, man, that must mean something about Jason Moore and Eric Mensah and these other guys. And now we don't know if that's in any way relative to that decision from Hero, because it could have just been about NIL. It could have been about anything else. Like he was in line to be the third defensive tackle with Caden McDonald and Edric Houston. So, and now he's gone. So like 5 years ago, we'd be like, well, you know what that means? That means someone else is coming.
It could mean that for Hero, because
right, it could,
I don't know how Texas figured out how to pay him if it's an NIL thing, because like that's supposed to be illegal.
Well, I mean, one of Ohio State's former defensive line coaches is now a defensive end coach at Texas. So you never know. Maybe there was just conversation the whole time.
Yeah, maybe. Brad, were you like outside the program? We're like, hey, Baron Browning should do all these things that we talk about with CJ Hicks, like to be around the program. Was there that same sort of thing? Like, can't you just get him moving around and line him up in a predator role or a jack role, hybrid role, like within the roster? Like,
so the Baron thing was interesting because me and Baron came in the same year. It was one of the things like all you saw every single day is that this guy's a freak. But then for some reason it wasn't translating to the field or in the film room. And then you realize now that he's had a successful career, it's like maybe we shouldn't have put that guy at middle linebacker. It's one of those like it was always like a constant question of like, hey, why is he not translating to like what he could be? And then obviously the Broncos did it right when he first got there. Like, hey, just put this guy down. And like a lot of people don't like Barron spent a lot of time with Coach Johnson on pass rushing, and then just when the games would come along, there was disconnect somewhere where it wasn't getting put in. So I think they're starting to realize like, hey, let's not make that same mistake again with CJ. I'm very optimistic in this sense, but I think CJ can play a really big role as a pass rusher, especially because you're losing a lot of experience in rushing the passer. Yeah. I mean, I think that's what Tyleek's not just a big D tackle. Tyleek could get pressure on the quarterback. And that's, I think, what you're actually going to miss on the inside. So that's why I think to the old Rushman packages where you'd have 5 guys, but 3 of them are DN style guys, and you just get after the quarterback with athletes.
But did you guys, when you were in the roster, again, we were put Barron at defensive end, do this. Was there a conversation internally of you guys saying, you know what, maybe Barron should move positions, or was it like, well, we just can't figure out why?
I feel like it was a lot of we can't figure out why. I mean, so 2017 he didn't play that much. 2018
we don't talk about 2018 defense.
Yeah, exactly. So that was my exact comment. You beat me to it. It's just one of those. I think there's a lot of other issues there.
I mean, Brendan White became an outside linebacker. How would Barron have looked in that spot other than Brendan?
Yeah. So that was
Brendan was a Rose Bowl MVP.
Yeah, that's one of my what if years. One of like 4 that I've had. Yeah. Like, hey, if we just fix
every
this
single year you
one
were on
thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then COVID year was weird. Barron's last year, so it's like you never got. It was one of those. It was 2018 was so weird, and then 2019 we had a really competent DC defensive plan, and that's when
Chase Young
and Chase Young, and that's where you'd see some things though. Like that's where you'd see some breakdowns in film of like, all right, he's not comfortable in this role of that middle linebacker. And then 2020 was that COVID year, interesting defense weird. So it's like I think a lot of things interrupted his actual pathway here, where I think CJ has it's a lot smoother of a pathway and like external factors going on. And I also think CJ's very motivated. I think he's very respected in that locker room. So I think it's a different view in terms of how like things are unfolding.
All right.
He only has 1 year left, right?
Yeah. Time flies, man.
Yeah, this is year 4. That's kind of crazy.
By the way, I was looking through, I was like sorting through some things for Kings of the North. So there's 28 teams. I was looking at that pass rush productivity metric that Pro Football Focus has. Of anyone who had like a single pass rush rep of those 28 teams, CJ Hicks was like 13th or something like that.
Well, when you let him rush the passer, it generally goes.
I think he had like five snaps at the edge, and he had 2 sacks. So, I mean, it turned out pretty good. So
good numbers.
Just has to do it. And again, you bring up the right part though. The CJ is handling this the right way, and he's like, I want to figure this out as well. Give me an opportunity to make some moves. And I don't know why the coaching staff seems to be less stubborn than they were 6 years ago when this was going on with Barron. So they're seemingly more open to the idea of this. So I would be shocked if he's playing any linebacker this month.
Pretty exciting to see what that would look like. But a couple weeks away, start of practice. Don't even know what those practices are going to look like, but we know that they will be here soon enough. Shorter show in here at Roosters this week because we're in the midst of it. And then people are scattered across the country. They're on cruises. The current players are on there. Coaches are all taking some vacation. And we're taking some time to relax a little bit too. But we still want to come hang out in Roosters and talk a little ball with Bradley Robinson and get some mac and cheese bites, which on appetizer Thursday tomorrow will be $3. So get those. Thanks to Brad for coming to hang out. Thanks to Jeremy Birmingham and Bill Landis. I am Austin Ward. Thank you to the team at Roosters here on Henderson Road. It's a fun, casual joint. We'll be back in here next Monday. We'll see you then.